fascinated. I mean, I think I heard the judge, of course, I'm going to defer to you, of course. The direction was inadequate. What does it mean by that? That's direction from the trial judge.
The issue of the judge's directions to the jury is really important because the judge explains the law and explains their options. And if it is that there have been any kind of difficulties that have arisen during the course of the trial, the judge will explain to the jury how they should treat those issues. Mm-hmm. So in the case here of the corrupt juror, what we heard the Privy Council saying there is that the judge did not give proper directions to the jury. The judge should have said to the jury, you should not let knowledge of this bribery affect your decision in any way. You should not, there is no evidence. I'm just giving an example. Sure. There's no evidence, for instance, linking this bribery attempt to the defendants. You should not hold it against the defendants. You should not, therefore, let it influence whether you find in favor of guilt or innocence.
And we were just seeing some shots there from Waterford, Gaza City. That's Kartel's base, so to speak, and there was some graffiti that you saw on the ground there just now. But that's the situation there, where you have a reporting team also in Gaza, so to speak, and we are hoping to get some reactions from his fans and followers there. And he also said that the second point was that the trial continued with Juror X, and that was fatal to the safety of the trial.
Yeah, because the issue is, this man is corrupt. We know he's corrupt, and as I was mentioning earlier, he's still allowed to sit with the other jurors, and he's allowed to go into the jury room with them and deliberate, and we don't know what he was saying. We don't know how the whole thing affected their deliberations. And the judge made mention of one issue that came up, because a lot of people watching this were then saying, hold on, so does this mean that would this mean that all I have to do is bribe one juror, or even just try to bribe one juror, and then the trial is derailed? Everything have to start over from scratch. We will never get anywhere in terms of the trial process. So what the lawyer during the appeal said to the Privy Council judges is that, look, he understands that issue, but that can't be that can't be the way in which you decide, okay, let's keep the corrupt juror here. He was suggesting that if that is a problem, and if Jamaica thinks that this is going to be a problem or could be a problem, what we need to do is change our law, as has been done in England. And we heard the judge make mention of it there. Yes. So essentially, what the law would then say is that if you have a situation where you need to dismiss an entire jury, or you need to dismiss so many jurors that you no longer have a jury that is the required number in law, then you are allowed to dismiss the jury, and the case then continues before the judge alone. Currently, Jamaica does not have that law in place. So in Jamaica, if it is that we have to dismiss the jury, the trial would have to start over from scratch. Because I think there's been a lot of focus on this particular corrupt juror. But as the judge mentioned earlier there, and I think a lot of people forgot, there was a juror that had to be dismissed earlier on. Right. She had come to the judge and she had said that her son was at the Horizon Remand Center, and that the defendants at the time in the matter had come to realize that he was there because she went there to visit him. She went to the judge and she said, I'm afraid for his safety, I want off this case.
And she was released.
And she was released from the case. That is what brought the jury down to 11.
Right.
So the judge was then faced with a situation where if he dismissed this corrupt juror, he then would have 10, and 10 jurors could not sit on this case by law.
And you're saying in England, where the law has been amended, when it drops to 10, there is provisions for it eventually to become a judge-only trial.
Whether it's 10, I don't know what their number is in terms of how many jurors, but the point is, if they have to dismiss their entire jury, if it's for whatever reason, there's contamination or drugs or whatever it is, they have a provision that their trials can still continue. Because especially after this particular trial, there is going to be, I think, a very real concern that in any kind of criminal trial, people are going to say, okay, it sends money to bribe somebody, and then the trial is going to be has to be derailed. We should point out though, that the corrupt juror in this case was tried, he was convicted in the parish court, and he was sentenced to 9 months in prison. So it's not at all that he got off scot-free here.
Okay. I see some more judicial reform, new legislation coming, particularly in this case, Leon.
I think that's one issue. I think the other issue that arises is whether we're going to see an increased thrust for the continued abolition of jury trials. We've seen jury trials abolished in a number of different types of cases. Juries don't sit in commercial cases, in defamation, and a number of other kinds of cases. And we have heard a number of people in authority, including the Chief Justice, say strongly that they believe that we should abolish jury trials because they're simply too problematic. I think this is one more bow in the arrow for people who are of that view.
And this, of course, has been met with some significant resistance from the bar and the persons at the bar.
Defense lawyers are very strongly of the view that juries should not be abolished, that the jury system serves a lot of serves a significant purpose that is very important, especially in cases like murder, to have a panel of your peers sit and just listen to the facts and come to a decision. Mark you, the bar was very much against the law that gave the right of appeal to the prosecution, and that went ahead despite the opposition. So I don't think the opposition in and of itself will necessarily stop it if the legislators have decided that this is going to make for a smoother justice system. And we're having all kinds of issues with jury trials in terms of getting enough jurors and so on.
And the judge also made reference to the fact that the juror X sat in the deliberation, and as you were suggesting earlier in the preamble before we got to the judgment, that what would other jurors be thinking, knowing that he was there? What did he say to them and stuff? So they raised that also as a significant point.
Yeah, and I want to stress that a little bit because, to make sure people understand the point that is being made here, that say you're part of a jury, right? And me and you on the jury. And then I hear say, you, Milton, were trying to bribe the other jurors, maybe you were trying to bribe me, to hand down a not guilty verdict.
Right.
And my thing would be, wait, walk on your son, no man, something not go on. Something, I'm just going to come down and hand down a guilty verdict. To overcompensate is a word that the judge used for the attempted bribery. In other words, the concern is that the jurors might have felt that, all right, there's an attempt here to force a not guilty verdict by corruption, by unlawful means. So let us stand in the breach and make sure that the verdict is one of guilt. So the question is, were the correct considerations weighing on the minds of the jurors when they made that determination of a guilty verdict?
We've talked about a retrial. The original trial took 64 days. Do you think if there's a retrial, a fresh trial, it will take that long?
Yes, because I think that there would have to be a considerable attempt to dot every single I, to cross every single T, because there are a number of concerns that arose in relation to this trial. We spoke about the issue of the custody of the cell phone. There was also the concern about some of the telephone data evidence, and the fact that the law wasn't followed in relation to the person, the particular police officer who applied to Digicel for the cell phone evidence and who received it was not authorized by law to do so. Now, those are not issues on which the Privy Council decided to comment, because you heard them say that the issue of the jury misconduct was so strong and so determinative that they did not feel it.
So the Privy Council has ordered that incarcerated on Saul Ortiz vybz Kartel and his three co-accused have their conviction quashed for the murder of Clive Lizard Williams. The Judicial Committee of the Privy Council concluded that the appeal should be allowed and the appellant's conviction should be quashed on the grounds of juror misconduct, and that the case should be remitted to the Court of Appeal to decide whether to order a retrial for the murder of Clive Lizard Williams, the Privy Council stated. The UK-based Privy Council, the highest tier of the court system in Jamaica, handed down their decision today to have the convictions of vbyz Kartel, fellow entertainers Sean Campbell, Kahira Jones, and Andre St. John quashed based on the agreements presented last month. On February 14-15, Judge Lennox Campbell should have allowed telecommunication evidence which was obtained in a matter that allegedly breached Parma's constitutional rights to Privy Council into the trial. Another ground cited for appeal was the judge's decision to not discharge a juror or the accused juror following allegations of bribery attempts. The four men first attempted to appeal their sentences in the Court of Appeal, but they were held up by Kartel.
For bail. I expect to see that as soon as possible. And then depending on whether or not bail is granted, we'll see what unfolds after that in terms of the timetable that's set out.
And the appeal for bail would be to the Court of Appeal?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Is there anything else that you want to share with us in terms of this judgment and lessons learned?
Lessons learned. Lessons learned, I would say, go to the issue of, I think the jury management issue is one of the major things for us. The chain of custody of evidence and the jury management is something that I think is a big thing that we're going to be talking about going forward from this. I think it's also going to reignite discussions. Those people who believe strongly that we should hold on to the Privy Council as our final Court of Appeal, I think this is going to energize them, because the Court of Appeal issued a unanimous judgment in which they upheld the convictions here. The late Justice Dennis Morrison, one of our brightest legal minds, was in fact presiding over that panel, and the Court of Appeal unanimously upheld the conviction. So those people who have been saying we have to hang on to the Privy Council, this is going to be more fuel for them. All right, Dion,
until we have a report of Sandy Williams, who's at the Jamaica Bar Association, with Brett Samuels, lead attorney for the defense. Sandy, go ahead. Yeah.
Thanks, Milton. I'm currently at the office of the Jamaica Bar Association with the legal team for Mr. Sean Campbell, one of the men who were convicted and is serving time in the vbyz Kartel murder case. Now, Mr. Samuels, can you give us your reaction to the ruling of the Privy Council, which was handed down shortly?
Well, to consider, the men have been in custody. Sean Campbell, who we represent, for over 13, 14 years. We are elated that their convictions have been quashed by the Privy Council. And now we're going to see what will go going forward, whether who his legal team will be to go to the Court of Appeal to argue that there should be no retrial.
Okay, so what's the next step forward after that?
The next step...
Will you be representing him going forward?
Well, it depends on his choice. Our retainer with him, our agreement is now over today. If he wants us to continue, we're more than willing to represent him.
Have you spoken to your client?
No, I have not spoken to him. You mean in the last 10 minutes?
Before the, yes.
No,
before the,
no, we have not been in communication for a while, but I know his other persons have contacted him, and I'm in contact with those persons.
Okay. All right, that is Mr. Bert Samuels, the attorney representing Sean Campbell.
Along with Ms. Samuels. Yes.
Representing Mr. Sean Campbell in the vbyz Kartel murder case. It's back to you, studio.
Thank you very much, Sandy. Elated at the quashing of the conviction, and we will argue no retrial.
Yeah, as I said, I know they're going to argue the issue of the length of time that Kartel and others have been in custody. We've also heard
Babylon say jail for me. Say jail for me.
I think all those issues are going to be brought to bear in the argument that there should be no retrial. On the other side, what I would be expecting to hear from the prosecution is that this was such a
For me, my destiny. But.
justice, that in the public interest that this matter should be tried again, unless it is, I think, that the director's office feels that they cannot successfully mount another prosecution.
Is it possible that the prosecution may say, given the time that's passed and you know, custody of the evidence and so on, that we don't think we can mount a successful trial, that they could not?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on, as I said, their knowledge of their witness, whether or not their witness is willing to testify again. So, I mean, we'll see what happens in that respect. However, I mean, we've seen situations in Jamaica where we've had up to, for instance, three trials in particular cases, you know. So just the fact that it's a retrial in and of itself isn't grounds to say, let's not go ahead. There will have to be the other supervening factors that both sides will argue and on which the court will make a decision.
11 or 12 years between the trial and the Privy Council ruling, quite a long time.
I think it depends on your perspective. Though, remember, they were sentenced to life in prison. You know, the sentence was life in prison with 20 for the possibility of parole, and 30 odd years in the case of Kartel and one of the others before the possibility of parole. And I stress it that way because I find people tend to assume that after the 20 years, 30 years, 15 years or whatever, the person's automatically released on parole. There's no automatic release. It's a process, and the person may or may not be released. But the sentences were life in prison. So if it is that the court perhaps feels that there is very strong evidence and in the interest of justice there should be a retrial, then we very well could start doing this all over again.
Amazing. But that's justice and our justice system, and the layers. That's why we have layers in our judicial system, to work with all the kinks and to correct mistakes made at the lower levels as well.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens now.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you very much for being with us. Thanks so much to our that it would go back to the Court of Appeal for a possible retrial. So we await that hearing and what the Court of Appeal in Jamaica will decide. Until later, midday news comes up in a few minutes, and we'll have primetime news.
Kartel.